All right, what we want to do here is build a website, a one-page website in Photoshop. Now, there are other applications, obviously, that you can build websites into, but here we just want to almost make a mock-up or a custom concept that we have for a website. And we use that in Photoshop because there's so many great tools in here that we could use to do that, but we do have to set it up initially first. But what I want to show you is the current one that I have here. I have this grid pattern that I'm using. I'm going to explain a little bit later. Some basic simple constructs that we have with our one-page website. Now, a one-page website is very simple. It's just simply one page. It doesn't click really anywhere else. If I click on another tab or a navigation, it's going to just scroll down and to the anchor where it would go there. This is the About section, this is the Portfolio section, and this is the Contact area. So it's not going to link really anywhere else unless I wanted to, but a one-page website is usually very simple for businesses that just need some basic information. Everything's on one page, nice and easy. So that's what we're going to look at today. So what I want to look at first, though, is actually looking at websites and what they provide for us in terms of how they work. So if I go to Apple, I like going to Apple because it has a basic understanding of how it works. Very simply, we have this large navigation at the top, the logo. Yes, of course, we know the logo. Pictures, lots of nice big pictures, lots of open space on the side, negative space, which is great, white space we call it. Some banners, some good column structure. So here I have a one column structure. Here's a two column structure. They start to open things up into different structures, which is great, and then they bring it back to here. So at this time, in 2022, this is what we're seeing. The thing we have to understand about websites is that they're responsive. So now they move more with the content. The content moves with the width of the website. So the width of the browser, I should say, really. Because now we have desktops that are larger or smaller, we have laptops that are larger or smaller, iPads, we have tablets, we have mobile devices that are even smaller. So as I shrink this down, the content starts to change. It responds. It's responsive to the width of the browser. So right now, this is my normal size on my 5K iMac. It's a 2880 for my resolution, the width. So as I bring it down, everything stays the same. The negative space starts to contract a little bit, which is fine. And I start to bring it down even further and further. And as I get a little closer to the end here, my pictures changed. So the content responded to the pictures. They made it, the pictures got a little bit smaller. Okay, let's keep going and keep an eye on this navigation to see what happens as well. As I scroll that down, the spacing between the navigation gets a little bit tighter as well. And I continue to shrink it and shrink it and shrink it. At some point, it's going to change and the content's going to change a little bit more. So I continue, and right there. So right around here, my navigation changed to that new method of that kind of hamburger menu. So I click on that, and now I have the drop-down menu there. So it's no longer all the way across. That's fine. And I'll keep going and scrolling, and oh, now my content's changed again. My type gets a little bit smaller. The picture changes as well. So this is roughly, we could say, almost like a laptop, or sorry, a tablet size right about here. And as I go further and further and further, well, now some of the content actually starts to get cut off. Well, that's okay. We can still see what's going on. This is roughly about the mobile width. So this is mobile dimensions right here. And as I scroll down, well, we notice that this column structure changed too. Now it's all one column structure. If I go back a little bit, I'm going to see at what point this actually right about there. So right about there, it went from a two column structure to a single one column structure all the way down, which is still clean. Well, once again, the content responded to the browser. So let me do that one more time. I'm going to type in a new one, and we're going to call it, it's going to be Amazon, a very common looked at site. And here it is. And what I get is this, wow, it's okay, fully expanded all the way across, but I still have this big negative space here, but that's good negative space to not load it with lots of graphics or a background image or anything like that. Keep it very simple, because what you want to push is the content inside of this area. Now, roughly, I'm going to use a measure it tool, and roughly the actual content you want to kind of be inside here. This is about 1,500, and that's pretty large considering what all the content that's in there. There's a lot there. But if I go back to the Apple site and I look at its size, its main visible size that it uses, I'm going to use this measure it tool that I have. And I'm going to measure, and it's roughly 1,000. Now, when I've looked at some content and different research for visible sizes, we're talking about the visible area that we have to think about when a lot of people are looking at devices all these different types of devices, different types of resolutions, different types of widths of their browser. So they roughly say 900, 1,000. Obviously, we saw that Amazon does it at 1,500, so they have a lot of content to show, which is really cool. But right now we're going to do ours at 1,000. We're going to kind of keep it roughly around here. But what I did want to show you here was kind of how we look at the responsiveness of this. So once again, the header, the navigation, the search bar is really, really large. We have a lot of different navigation here, and even more and even more. So as I scroll it down, as I start to shrink the width, obviously it starts to respond. This search bar gets thinner, some of these start to disappear, and it continues and goes and goes, and it's responding. The content, it was responding to the website. And now as I get too close here to this actual visible area that was once 1,500, well, it's starting to kind of now shrink in. It's getting a little bit tighter. Once again, the content's responding a little bit more, pictures get a little bit smaller. So we're going to design a website, and then our column structure changes. So we had our column structure change from 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now it's going to a 3 column structure, 1, 2, 3, which is a great way to lay out our content. Now, obviously, it's not responsive at this point. It just gets cut off. But remember, obviously, looking at some of these websites on a tablet or a mobile device, it will render properly on a mobile device, be it a tablet, smartphone, a laptop, whatever the case is. So right now on my desktop, this is the way it looks. So things do change, and we do need to think about that even as we design. So what I'm going to go and click on my website here, and my current one that I have here is more or less, I'm going to remake this, but with some best practices and kind of the initial setup that we want to look at. Okay, so let's do that. So I'm going to, in Photoshop, I'm going to go to Command N or Control N or File and New. And that brings me up here. What I first want to look at is actually some of these presets. We never really look at the presets that Photoshop gives us, or Adobe in general gives us, in a lot of our different apps like Illustrator and InDesign. So I'm going to go to Web, and these are actually the most common. So I have the most common 1366, Web Large 1920, which we're going to use that. We also have Web Medium. So these are some of the most common screen sizes that we have seen. Now it is going to be 1920 that I'm going to play with, but I'm going to bring in some margins so I can utilize that white space on the sides like we saw on the Amazon website and the Apple website. I definitely want to see that used, because we definitely need to utilize that the best way possible. Now there is a situation here, as you can see on mine, that I go past the margin. Like here's my margin, but in some situations you go past it. So yeah, you could have content go over the margin, but it shouldn't be important information. We should be able to say, yeah, you know what, it's going to get cut off. That's okay. What's inside the margin is the most important. So that's why my important content stays within the margin, just like print design. We want to keep our most important information inside the margins that we set up for ourselves, so things do not get cut off. Okay. So let's start with that. I'm going to go 1920. I'm just going to do this. Now, I do want this particular one to be 1920 no matter what. That is going to be the width. We're going to assume that the width of the browser that the person has is going to be 1920, but we could also assume that the content will be responsive and move with it. Now, we're just designing a website. We're not developing anything. We're not actually putting code to this. We're just laying it out as a concept, potentially to send to a developer or potentially to develop ourselves in time. But let's first initially come up with a concept. Now, the height doesn't matter. However, the height should be significant. Right now, the height for this is quite large. It's much larger than 1920, as we can see. So even if I put 1920 here, I'm actually going to go even further, because the one-page website is going to scroll longer, right? And we're used to scrolling. We've been scrolling on social media for a long time. So the viewer is familiar with scrolling. They don't mind scrolling. Instead of going inside, linking inside pages, which we see commonly as well, we're just going to make a one-page website. So let's actually start, let's go to 3,000 as a start. So it's going to be pixels. Make sure you set on pixels. I do not want artboards on. We're going to talk about artboards at another project. So I do not want to see artboards on right now. It's just going to be one single canvas, and we're going to put everything on there. So 1920 by 3000. The resolution, this is for web, so we're going to keep the resolution at 72 pixels per inch. Normally for print, it would be 300 pixels per inch, but we don't need that type of resolution for digital displays. We only need 72 pixels, and make sure it's pixels per inch and not pixels per centimeter, because pixels per inch would make it quite larger, and we don't need that. The other thing I'm going to look at, obviously, for print, we look at CMYK, but even when working in Photoshop, we always want to keep it at RGB because we're going to have more access to more things in Photoshop. So make it RGB. Everything else stays the same. Totally fine with that. I'm just going to press create. There I go. So there's my 1920. So now I can see that up here. It goes from 0 to 1920. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit there. And there I see my full out resolution is, like I said, it starts at 0 to 1920 roughly. So that's a common size of width that we see on a browser. Now what I want to do here, actually I want to set up my grid. I want to set it up, make sure it's correct, make sure it's proper. And that way I could start working within the grid and within my margins as well. So let's set that up first. So what I'm going to do in here, I'm going to go to my view, and I'm going to go to my new guide layout under view, and I'm going to select here. So right now, already automatically set up, it's going to say I have a 12 column structure, which is what I wanted. Now there is a custom or a preset that I could just say 12 column, which I can click on, and it sets up a 12 column structure. That's great, because yours, I think I already had mine set up from before, so it remembered the information. Yours probably doesn't have that. Now, if I want to do my own 12 column structure, I can 12 column, and I can even change my gutter. So these, the larger areas, are the columns. The inside smaller ones are called the gutters. So I can change up the gutter size. I can make it really small or much bigger. Okay, there is a default. Now I'm going to set mine at 20, maybe 24. Now let's go back to 20, because what it is if I put some information here, there should be enough space between that the viewer doesn't get too confused with this overlap, or that there's enough space between that so they don't get confused, like if this runs into this, runs into that. So really we can make it even bigger, but if I make it too big, well, that just doesn't make sense. So roughly about 20, I'm going to keep it at that. And I'm happy with that. Now I could also add a margin, which is what I want to do. So this is 1920. I want my margin roughly to make it so I have 1,000. Okay, so I'm going to do that. So I'm going to have 1920, but I want my visible area to be 1,000. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to get rid of my top margin. I'm going to get rid of my bottom margin. I don't need them at the top and bottom. What I am going to do is bring up my calculator just to show you. So if my the full width of my browser currently is 1920. That's the most common screen size. It's a very common screen size right now, 2022. 1920. And I want to subtract so I can have a 1,000 pixel visible space. That's what we discussed earlier. Remember, Amazon was 1,500, Apple was 1,000. We're going to keep it at 1,000. It seems to be a common visible space we want to use. I'm going to say okay. So obviously 1920 minus 920 is 920. Sorry, 1920 minus 1,000 is 920. Now I want to go one step further because I want margins. I want a margin here and here. So I need to divide that space up. So I get my space here and space here to create the proper margin. Right now it's only 20 pixels each. So obviously 920 divided by 2, 460. So let's put those numbers in here. My left margin is going to be 460 and my right margin is also going to be 460. So this will be my new visible space. Well, something happened there, right? We made everything smaller, but my gutters are pretty big now. My columns are changed. So what I could do, I'm going to zoom. I can't zoom in right now, but I could tell, and I can change this anytime I want. I'm going to bring this down a little bit, my column structure for my gutters. Just my gutters, I'm going to bring them down because now I want my columns to be a little bit bigger and the gutters in between to be a little bit less. So let's do a 12 column structure, 16 pixel gutter, 460 pixels to my left margin and 460 pixels for my right margin. And now I'm going to have this nice visible space here. Now, realistically, if you want to as well, which I currently don't recommend myself to do because I usually play around with varying heights, you can also add rows. If you want to say, you know what, I want 6 particular rows, I'm going to put something in this area and then something in this area and so on and so on. Now, this is actually a good idea to use because when we actually create sections for ourselves, we're going to really organize this website into sections. I really want to have some nice space and play around with, but these columns might not work out specifically perfect for me. So I am actually going to get rid of them, but I am going to be smart with how I utilize my space for my sections. So I'm just going to say, okay, now it's good to preview it so you can see what's going on. And there I go. There's my column structure. The next thing we have to do, which is super important, go to our view and we have to lock our guides, because if I don't, I'm going to move it accidentally like that. And defeats the purpose of even having the guides. So view, lock your guides. Now I can't move them. They're not going anywhere. They're not doing anything. Perfect. This is exactly what I want. Now, the next thing I want to show you is an interesting way. Now, you don't have to do this, but this might be something that might benefit you to utilize already pre-existing layouts that you might find very useful. Now, if I go back to my structure here and I go to Amazon and I see, wow, you know what? They have a really nice layout. I like the way that, their header is. I like the way they lay things out here. Maybe you like this layout. Maybe you like Apple's layout, the way that they do things with a very simple structure. Maybe you like that. And once again, these sites have been researched by many, many people, thousands of dollars, and a lot of time, thousands of dollars, millions of dollars have been put into this to create the best design for their product, for their service. So utilizing other people's research in the way that they present their information online is not a bad idea. So the way that this comes together, very simple, trying to push this product in this one and over, maybe this isn't a bad way to do this. However, I do want to show you another way here. I'm going to create a new tab and I'm going to type in Theme Forest. Now, Theme Forest is a great website to look at many different well put together themes. It's an Envato Market option. I just really like looking at it to get lots of different ideas on layouts. Now, what I'm not looking at here is our pictures and typefaces and color. I'm really not looking at that. You can, of course, because it's always a great idea to get inspired by some of these sites and all that. But what I want to do is I want to look at the different structures that people have put together that work really, really well. And remember, all these sites, I'm going to look at my WordPress. I'm going to go to popular items, WordPress popular items, and I'm going to click. Actually, I like looking at B here, the B theme. I'm going to click on this, and what it does, all these different sites. First of all, they're the most popular downloaded WordPress sites. Well, WordPress is a pretty cool thing where you can content management system where you can put in your own content in the back end and it presents it in a very nice way. But these layouts have been tested time and time again that they work really well. They're responsive. And they just make sense in the design world of website, the web design. So I'm going to click on B theme. And what I'm going to do, I'm just going to see, okay, well, there's a lot of different options here when I go through it. So I'm going to click on my live preview that shows up. And what it does, it shows me, wow, okay, the responsive version of this site looks great. So I have my logo on the side. I have my navigation up top with some drop downs. Okay, interesting. Now we're not doing that because we're just doing a simple one-page website. It really utilizes the full width of the page. So as I scroll it down, once again, it's responding, right? This is responding. The content's getting smaller. At some point, I think, yeah, this kind of changes up too. So a lot of great responsiveness, but we still have to think about the structure. So what I'd like to do here, I'll go down and scroll. I'm like, okay, we're really nice hierarchy, nice title, subtitle. I have a nice title up here with some great body content. So this is my body content where it's a far more readable information that I have to make sure. Have a nice picture. So it's kind of like a 3-column structure here. Another 3-column structure. I'm going to get into the column structures a little bit later. But what I want to look at here, I want to look at different websites that I can see. So all these different ones here, as I go down a little bit further, are different sites that I can look at with slightly different layouts based on the main overall layout. So as I scroll down, I see, wow, a lot of different sites. So you know what, maybe I'm interested in looking at this one here. Maybe I'm interested in, I see this one, it's like, wow, I really like where the logo is. I like how the navigation is set up. I love this main big picture with some content inside of it. You know, I like the way this is. I love this image. I like, okay, everything's centered. I really wouldn't center all my type like that. It's not very readable. It's not horrible, but it's not great. Okay, left align. I kind of like the way they did this. You know what? Maybe I want to choose this theme. I got a little parallax going on there in an inside picture as well. And this other 3-column structure again. You know what? I'm going to say, I'm going to go back one more just to kind of look at one more, see how that looked. Let's see another one here. Let's look at this healthy food. Okay, let's see how this one looks. Just looking at the structure. Navigation at the top again, but this time the logo's on the side. Here I have this kind of nice color here, but this still is my overall main picture, but there's quite a bit more content in there, some buttons. Then they have another section here with some info here, my title kind of, and separated into a quadrant, so 1, 2, 3, 4, but still a kind of 3-column structure. Another nice picture. So wow, this one's really nice too. I like the typefaces they chose. I like the color, but really we're looking at the structure, and I like how all this content is here. You know what? This one looks really good too. So maybe I have a website that looks like this. Great. What I am going to do though, I'm going to choose this one. So what I'm going to actually do is I want to copy the whole website, the structure of it, and bring it into my Photoshop document and utilize the structure of it. Now, once again, I say you don't have to do this, but it might be something to use time-tested, really good design that works well, is responsive, and utilize its structure to create your own website. So I'm going to do that. And the way to do that is I'm going to copy this content. I'm going to copy the URL. It's copied. I'm going to go to create a new tab. Now I like to use Firefox, Command T to make a new tab, or Control T on a PC. And I'm just going to type in screenshot website. All right. So screenshot website. So now any one of these work well. However, the one that I like is this site shot capture a website screenshot. So what it does, it allows me to take a screenshot of any website, that a URL I put in. So that's why I copied the URL earlier. So I'm just going to click on site shot. Like, once again, this might work. These ones might work. Maybe the one I suggest doesn't work at the time, or you have better luck with other ones. Try a different one. They're all really good, but I really like site shot because I get a little bit more some really nice options here, which I don't for others. So you know what, I'm going to say that I want my full size. Yeah, I want it to be full size. I want the resolution to be 1920 1080. Remember, it's going to be 1920. I could change it. I could play around with my zoom. I could play all these things. What my format in the end is going to be, it doesn't matter if it's a PNG or JPEG. They're both great. A scale 100%, so don't touch that. At the top here, I'm just going to type or paste in the website, Command V or Control V on a PC, and there it is. I'm just going to click on shot. Now what's going to happen here? Let's see, it's going. All right, there I go. So here is more or less what it's going to look like. It's like, yeah, that's it. I had my navigation at the top, my picture, my content is scroll, scroll, scroll. Well, some of it got, no, okay, did a little bit of a weird thing with the parallax. Yeah, the parallax really kind of messed it up. Not cool. So you know what I'm going to do? Because that parallax offered a bit of an issue for me, even though I liked all of it, it looked really cool. Well, you know what I got to do? I'm going to have to choose the other one because the other one just didn't work for me. So let me try this one because hopefully it didn't have any parallax. I'm going to copy that. I'm going to do the same thing now. I'm going to paste in the new one. I'm going to let it go. All right, there it is. So scroll up, yeah, that's where it was. That's what it looked like, that nice negative space on the sides. I'm gonna scroll down, keep going. So yep, roughly, it captured the whole thing right up to the contact. No issue with the parallax, which was great. So you gotta keep that in mind too. Now, of course, you could take your own screenshots of the site. So, you know, I really, really want this, but I had the issue with that. I could even, you know, Command minus out and potentially get a sense of it, but it doesn't really work too much. Command plus, bring it back up to, you know, 100%. And I could just take screenshots on a Mac. I could do a Command Shift 4. And then I could just, you know, screenshot, drag what I want, which I'm not going to do. I'll show you really quickly. I could just click and drag. And there's my screenshot. Well, I don't want to do that. Or I could do Command Shift 3, which just does a screenshot of my whole screen, which I don't really want once again. So either way, I'm happy with this. It looks good. And now that's all I'm going to do is I'm going to download it right here. I'll click on that. And then it just automatically downloads to my downloads. Okay, great. So I'm done with this. I've found a website that I like, potentially, that I want to mimic its structure. So I go to my documents, I click on it, and I just drag it into my, actually I'm going to drag it onto my Photoshop. I'm not going to drag it into my document specifically. I'm going to drag it into Photoshop first, or I can go to File and Open it. I could just go to File, Open, I can find that document, and here it is. This is the website. I grabbed that nice screen capture, and now what I can do, I'm going to bring it into my new document. So what I can do, there's a couple different ways to do that. I could just click and drag it and bring it in. It's not letting me do that. So what I need to do is click off of my lock that automatically gets put there when you open it up in a new document. And now I can click and drag it, move it around. I'm going to click and drag it. I'm not letting go of my click. I bring it onto my new canvas, and there it is. All right. So I have I'm going to bring it down. Remember, I've locked my guide so nothing's moving around. And there is my structure. It fits perfect right there. Great. Another way to do it, because I unlocked it, you're able to copy layers. So I could actually copy the layer, Command C or Control C on a PC, and Command V, and there it is again. It just pasted itself in perfectly this time, actually, which I didn't have to move it around. So that's a better way to do it, it seems. So I'm just going to throw one of them. There it is. And once again, I was like, uh-oh, well, it doesn't show me the whole website. Now remember, this website that I captured was really, really long. A couple different ways to do this. I want to show you 2 different ways to extend my canvas. Now, a quick way to do it is one way. I'm going to show you the longer way, but I do want to show you this option here. Go to Image and Canvas Size. I can change the size of the canvas, not the image, just the canvas. So right now it's 1920, perfect, by 3000. Remember, I set it up at 3000 earlier. What I'm going to do is I want to lengthen it. I want to make it longer. The height, let's make it maybe even 6000. But this anchor area is very important when we do that. I'm going to show you what happens when I leave the anchor alone, and I'm just going to say the height 6000. Remember, the width doesn't change. Do not change the width. I'm just going to change the height to 6000. Once again, you might not do this option. You might do the latter option. And I'm just going to press OK. Now what happens is it increases the size of my canvas, but it kind of did it in a pretty weird way. Well, number one, because my background was set to blue, it set my background to blue, the extra space that wasn't available earlier, because it increased the size to 6000 and made it blue. Well, that's kind of interesting. Okay. And it also pushed it to the bottom. Well, not really. What it did was, it was originally 3000, and what it did, I added another 3000. So it added 1500 up this way and 1500 down that way. Well, that's kind of one way to do it. I could just click on this and bring it back up, and that's totally fine. But let's do it another way. Image, I'm going to go to canvas size, but instead I am still going to make it 6000, but this time I'm going to use my anchors. Now what I'm telling Photoshop to do right now without touching anything, it's more or less saying expand it from the center. So add 1500 this way and 1500 pixels that way. Well, that's not what I want. I've already set it up here at the top. So really what I should say is start from the top and push down. So hopefully that helps. So now it's going to add 3000 pixels, not this way and that way. It's going to add a full 3000 pixels down this way. So let's see what happens. And there's my option there. Canvas extension color, background, white, gray. You know what? I'm going to make it white because I didn't want it to be the background, that weird color. I'm going to make it white, but now it's actually not going to matter because I'm going to press OK, and look at that. It actually pushed the canvas down this way instead of pushing it from the center, going a few pixels up here, a few pixels down that way. Now this is exactly what I wanted. Now this is one method of doing it. I'm going to show you one more method of doing it, which is even simpler. I'm going to use the crop tool. That's it. Click on my crop tool, and I'm just going to grab, I can grab from wherever, but clearly there's more information at the bottom. I'm going to click on the bottom one, and look at that. It actually shows me everything. I can drag it down all the way to the bottom and show my full picture there. Press enter, and then the crop is set, and there I go. All right, nice. Now you can see my background doesn't fully extend all the way. The picture did, that was great. Now if I want to, I could just click on my background, Command T, or edit free transform, Command T or Control T on a PC, and just drag it all the way down. Now it's kind of dragging it proportionally, which I don't want, so I'm going to hold down Shift, and I'm going to bring it all the way down. Now, once again, this is this website that I'm using, but I'm probably not going to use it for the structure, but I am going to show you what I mean by utilizing the structure. So once again, you do not have to do this part of it, but you might want to find a website that you like the structure, and you might want to start playing around with it. Now, the good thing to do with the structure is first you want to start playing around with, just placeholders. The first thing I want to do, let me actually clean this up a little bit. Right now I know I should always label my layers, organize my layers, group my layers if I need to. So this was called, the reference. That was a reference picture. And this white is my background. Okay, so let's label them properly. You just got to double click on the word and do that. So just to rename them, just double click and it shows up. I'm going to select both. So I'm going to select one, hold down Command or Control on a PC, right click, and I can group the layers, group from layers. All right, and there's my group one. I can call it my background. all together to my background. Or instead of doing that, I could select them once again, hold down Command G groups them as well, or Control G on a PC, and once again, also call it background. So Command G or Control G will be your best friend. It's so great to use it. So there I have everything inside of one. Great. And remember, just in case you didn't know, all these background that it looks like this is like that checkered board, that gray and white. That's just a transparency. That means there's nothing there. It's see-through. There's nothing actually there. So there I go. Now, once again, to use this in a certain way, if you choose to do this, I can say, okay, you know what? I'm going to grab from here to here. I just grab my rectangle tool or my shape tool, but rectangle works best, obviously, in this situation. And I'm just going to say, you know what? Right from here to here is my navigation or my header. Now, for me, what happens was I actually set mine up so I always have rounded corners. But when I do drag out any shape layer, so this is a shape layer, just right up here it shows that it is a shape layer, so it's a vector based object in Photoshop. Even though Photoshop is a raster program, it is still a vector based, meaning it has the controls like a vector, but it still renders as a raster, so it is still will be pixelated or be made of pixels. So I want here, I look at my transform, I could transform some options here in the properties. If you do not see your properties panel, go to window and properties, and you can see all your panels here if you don't see them open. Same with my character or paragraph or history or color. They're all right here. So I could transform it. I could change the fill color of it. So let's say I want to make it red for some reason there. I could change it right here. If I want to add a stroke to it, I can add a stroke to it or no stroke. Here I could add a stroke and I could add my pixels, how many I want. I could also add in if I want my stroke to be inside, in the center, or outside. I could add the type of stroke, and if it's dashed, I could add the dash and gap. I could also add if I want rounded corners here. And right now I do not want rounded corners, and because it's all linked, they will all have no rounded corners. And there's some Pathfinder option too, but I'm not really going to play with that. I just wanted no rounded corners, but you can round corners here if you wish to. So there we go. So now I'm going to do, you know what? I can drag out another rectangle, or I'm just going to hold down Option and Shift and bring down this rectangle I already had. So I could just do that really quickly and it duplicates it. Or many different ways to duplicate a layer. Command J duplicates the layer and it's already duplicated. I'm going to delete that. I can right click and I can duplicate the layer right there. Right on the layer panel, I could hold down Option and click and drag down, and I've duplicated the layer. So many ways to duplicate a layer. I'm going to do it right here on the artboard. So now I can say, you know what? I had my header up there, and now this part is going to be my main, like my main picture, my main focus of my service or product that I'm providing. And you know what? I don't want them to be the same picture or the same color. I want them to be different. So I'm just going to double click on this layer right here on the actual object, double click, and I can make it black or whatever color I want inside of my color picker, and that's it. Say okay. So now there's a structure there. So here's another structure. So I'm going to click and drag this down, hold on Option and Shift, and I'm going to say within this area right here, that's going to be my next section of content. Okay, there's going to be a little bit of a break, a little bit of a space. And I'm going to click and drag this down a little bit further. Now, let me talk about something really quickly, what I like, what I prefer in Photoshop. By default, you're going to have auto select on, I do believe, in Photoshop. I hate auto select. I do not like auto select because sometimes when I'm working with transparencies or certain things, it actually is very difficult for auto select to understand what exactly I want to choose. So instead of, if I have auto select on, what auto select does, just if I click on something, that's it. It selects it automatically. So there I was, I click on that. It moves it. If I click on this, I can see, yes, it's going to click on that. That's great. I don't like auto select. So what I do is I usually shut it off. Well, how do I select something? Very simply, I can still select something in the layer panel and it will move accordingly, okay? Or I could hold down Command or Control on a PC and I could Command click and then I can move it around. I much prefer that method than auto select because I've always had trouble with auto select. Just something to mention to you, thought you might be useful for you. It is definitely useful for me. So I Command click, hold down Option, click and drag, and I do that. Now here's something you also have to mention as well. Photoshop does scaling and a little bit differently than Illustrator InDesign, where if I just click and drag, what it does, it proportionally scales everything without even pressing Shift. Now you could change that in your preferences, but what I do instead, I don't want it to be proportional, I just want to drag it down. I could hold down Shift and it just makes it unproportional. I'm squeezing it or stretching it. In this case, it's okay because it's just a rectangular box. It's a shape layer, not a big deal. But when it comes to images or type, you should definitely scale proportionally. So that's it, really. I'm just kind of playing around with, where things are, where things look. That's all I'm doing is creating placeholders based on this image that I've already had made here that I brought in as a useful guide. But once again, I'll mention it again, you do not actually have to do this part of it. Because you might just say, you know what, I want to create my own. I'm just going to start creating an interesting area here for my header, for my navigation, for my product or service. So kind of that's what I'm going to do here. So I'm going to get rid of all of these. I'm going to click on all those. What I do is click on the top one, hold on Command, and I can individually click them by holding Command, or click on the top one, hold down Shift, select the most bottom one I want to get rid of, and it selects all the ones in between as well. So I can just throw those out, they're gone. I'm also going to, I could use the transparency. Instead of having it full opacity, I could actually bring down the opacity of it, say, I don't need it as bright, I could bring it down. Either way, if you wanted to use that, but I'm going to shut it off because I don't want to use this at all. I'm going to make my one-page website now. I'm going to start from scratch and just start playing around. I'm going to try to duplicate this as much as possible and play around. So let's look at what I have here. Top bar with a little bit of social media icons. I have a logo at the top and I have my navigation. Now remember, the navigation must mimic what is in the body, and vice versa. The body must mimic the navigation. If I click on About, I should go to an About Us section. It should maybe even just be called About. If I click on the word portfolio, then once again, this is just a concept, but nonetheless, if I click on the word portfolio, it should take me to the gallery or the portfolio. You have to name these things properly. If I click on contact, it should take me to the contact area. If you put buy now, more about us, news, latest, whatever, those things, you should have more sections for them. You can't just add more navigation and not have areas for it on your one-page website. Everything needs to be contained in your one page. So make sure that your navigation matches what's going on in your body. That is very, very important. Okay, so I'm just going to start playing around here. So I'm going to zoom out. Now the zoom is also important. Here, we have to look at something. Right now, my website looks nice, it looks good, and I'm at 66.67% magnification. Now, really, when I'm designing this website, because I have my 5K screen and my resolution is 2880, I need to actually look at it at 200%. But on most other monitors, and this changes between monitors as well, all monitors and resolutions are different. Some are generally very similar. There's only so many different resolutions you can have, but some people might look at it a bit differently. What you might want to do is view at 100% for yourself to get a sense of exactly what the viewer is going to see online. This is what they're going to see, exactly this, but that's not the case on my screen. I actually have to look at it at 200%. This is what they see. This is how big things are actually. So if I made my type like, wow, okay, my type is really big. I double clicked on it. I'm going to make it, 50, let's pretend, which is ridiculous. But here it's like, wow, that's really big. But from afar, it doesn't look as bad, really. But I have to think in my head, okay, no. They're going to see it at this point size, at this point. So I have to make sure that my point size makes sense. Now, the other option, like I said, 100% is ideally where you want to be for most resolutions. Ideally, what you could look at is actual size, and actual size will give you the actual size it will be at. Now, this is more or less exactly where you should be designing it at. Actual size, or roughly, like I said, depending on your resolution, 100%. But actual size will help you see exactly roughly what this will look like, even though it might look a little different from the actual when it gets onto a browser. But this is a good idea to work with. But once again, I'm going to go back to 200%, and that works best for me. So once again, actual size or 100%. And what I get here now is I have a better understanding of where I need to be. So I'm going to do the same thing on my main, and I'm going to say I'm at 200%. Once again, I have to be at 200%. Yours can be at 100% or actual size. Let's actually try actual size. Go to view and actual size. Okay, it's significantly more, 338, which is really big. But I'm going to go to 200%. So this is what I'm going to look at here. Okay, so what I want to do, I want to bring in some content here. Number one, I'm going to drag in my my rectangle here for my top. I'm going to give it, I'm going to bring it up to there, and it's going to snap to the edges. And if it doesn't for some reason, if it's not snapping to the edges or anything like that, I can just go to View, and I can go to Snap, or Snap to, and make sure it's snapping to my guides, snapping to layers, other layers, or snapping to my document bounds, which is, that's my document bound. That's what I want there. Perfect. So there it is. Now it's white on white. So that's all I have to do is double click, and I can change the color of it. And the colors I had before were kind of like a bluish color, but I could always change that anytime. Let's just start with gray for now. Okay, great. What else did I have here? I had my social media icons. So what I did for you is I gave you some assets on Blackboard there. You could take a look at them and you could find the assets there. So in Illustrator, I've put them in here, social media icons. I'm just going to copy them. Now I could copy them individually. I could copy one at a time, but really quickly, I'm just going to copy them all, and I'm just going to paste them here. And here's what happens when we paste in vectors from Illustrator. So what did I do again? I went to Illustrator. I selected what I wanted. I copied it, Command C or Control C on a PC, and I went back into Photoshop, and I just said, yeah, paste them in, Command V or Control V on a PC. How do I want to paste them in? Well, I could paste them in as pixels. No, I don't want to do that. I want to paste them in as smart objects. What smart objects will allow me to do is they will keep their original data, what they're made up of, the actual size of them, and they will not lose quality. Let me show you what I mean. I'm going to bring them in as pixels, even though I don't want to. This is not the right thing to do. I'm going to press OK. And now they're going to show up. Okay, great. I press enter. They look good. At 200%, 100%, they look fantastic. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to scale them up really big. Okay, they don't look so good. I'm going to scale them down because maybe I want them to be in one place and another and then another. I scale them back up again. Okay, something's really wrong. These do not look good at all. I'm going to paste them in again, but this time I'm going to paste them in as smart objects. Okay, there they go. They look good. Command T, I'm going to scale them up really big. Ooh, those look really good, really clean edges. Even though they are made of rasters, they have really clean edges at the proper magnification. And I can scale them down, press enter. All right, Command T, free transform, scale them back up again. And they always retain that great quality they originally had. That's why we use smart objects when we bring in with vectors. So I'm going to scale them down again here. And maybe this time I'm just going to put them up here. And if I want to change the color of them, maybe I'll put it right up against the margin. I'm going to change the color of them. A couple different ways to change the color of these, okay? The one way, because it's a smart object, I could actually double click on my smart object here. I'm going to call these really quickly. I'm going to call these social media, if I can spell that right. All right, now what I can do, because it's a smart object, I can actually double click on this area here. That is the icon, the smart object. It opens it up in Illustrator as a separate document. It didn't go back to my original document I copied them from. It opened up a new document called Vector Smart Object. And here I can actually color them if I want to color them here. I'm going to make them white, and that's it. I could save it, Command S. All right, and I can go back to my Photoshop document, and look, they automatically changed to white because I double clicked on my smart object. It brought me to Illustrator. I changed it in Illustrator, and now they're white. That's one way to do it. Another way to do it right in here in Photoshop, so you don't have to go back to Illustrator, which is really easy to do. This open space here in my layer panel, I could just double click, and it opens up my layer styles. Now you have a lot of option here with layer styles. You can do so many things. You could add bevel and boss, a stroke, inner shadow, inner glow, satin, color overlay, gradient overlay, pattern overlay, outer glow, and a drop shadow. That's all I want to do is add a color overlay. So I click on color overlay. Automatically, one I had from before was a gray, so I'm going to bring up the opacity all the way up. I'm going to click on that. I'm going to say, you know what, make them black. Okay, there we go. Awesome. Actually, they were black before. Make them this lighter gray. There we go. Okay, done. I just press OK, and if I want to, I could add a drop shadow, which I don't really want to do. I'm going to press OK. That's how we access layer styles, and it shows me right there the FX or layer styles. That's what it is. I could shut it off if I don't want that color anymore. I could shut off just the color overlay or shut off the effect entirely. I could add more effects, or I could always just double click on it again, and it brings me back to layer styles, which once again I don't really need. All right, let's keep going on. Now the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to add in my logo. So I'm going to bring it to my logo here, and I'm going to go into Illustrator and go back to I'm going to close this. And once again, because this was the one that opened up when I double clicked on my smart object, I can close this. I can do whatever I want with it. I don't need to do anything with it. It's not I have to save it somewhere special at all. I don't have to do that. So you could just close it and it will remember exactly what you did. So once again, back into Illustrator, I'm just going to select my logo. Now I'm going to select the color logo just because maybe I wanted the color logo from before. Wherever your logos are, hopefully they're vector and you can copy them. So I'm going to Command C. I'm going to paste them in, Command V. And once again, should I bring it as a pixel? No, bring it as a smart object. There is a new option to bring it in as layers. So if you had multiple vectors on different layers, the layers option will allow you to actually save the layers in here in Photoshop. It'll bring in all your layers, not just an individual vector object on one layer. It'll actually bring in all the layers that you want, so you could have a lot more flexibility with moving it around or doing whatever you want. But I'm still just going to bring it in as a smart object. Okay, there it is. Maybe I'll size it up a little bit. And I'll go here. Remember, I got to work at 200%. And there's my logo. So once again, I can play around, do whatever I want with it. But right now, I'm just going to leave it there. Maybe I will bring it over to the margin just for now. So now the next thing I want to do, I want to bring in my type. Well, let's play around with some type. So, and what did I do here? It's still called untitled. So probably what I should do is name this properly, save it properly into an organized folder. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to go to File and Save As. And I'm going to go to my desktop, and I'm going to make a new folder. I'm going to call this is my website. Now you should name this properly based on your however you want to organize your folder. So website, create, and then this is going to be my Photoshop document. So new folder, PSD, create, and I'm going to put it in there. So now I should name this properly. Last name, first initial, section number, underscore, website. And that's it. It's a PSD. Great. PSD, Photoshop, and just save. That's it. And there it is. It's saved properly. Perfect. All right. Now what I can do, I'm going to bring in some type. So I wanted that about portfolio contact. That's the minimum amount of stuff I need. So I'm just going to, there's two ways to use the type tool. So I'm going to click on the type tool. I can either just click and start typing, or I can click and drag and create a type box, like a text frame. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to click a text frame, click and drag. So all the type in here can be, and automatically when I do that, lorem ipsum shows up. Now, as soon as I just start typing, it'll go away. So I'm going to type in about 1, 2, 3, 4 portfolio or gallery, 1, 2, 3, 4 contact. All right, that's it. So right now I see my content is centered inside of this text frame. I can go to my control panel up here and I can left align. I can go to my properties panel and do the same here, or go to my paragraph panel and do the same. So I have a lot of control over this. Now let's talk about type for a bit. The smallest you should go for readability on a website is potentially 18 point, even maybe 16 point. But 18 point is a good size for body content on the website. Anything smaller, it's going to get harder for people to read. Now there is a thing that with accessibility options now, you could actually make the type bigger. You make your screen size bigger, command plus and magnify it. You can a lot more accessibility options where you could just increase the size of the type to make it easier for you. There are a lot of options, but if you already have your type laid out in a really nice way, they won't. Viewers might not have to do that. Those have a harder time seeing, or they're in a different situation where it's very dark or very light, whatever the case is. Set up your type at the minimum 18 point for readability. Anything smaller than that, if I go 10 point, not a good idea, very small. So normally when we say, 12 point type, that's really big, actually in print, not on the web. So make sure that we get it up a little bit bigger, and let's base it off of 18 points. So this is my smallest type I will ever have on my website. Great. So I have that, it's all set up, it looks good. But you know what, it is navigation, so maybe I want to make it a little bit bigger. Let's just try it out. I'm going to bring it up to, say, fill up that column structure right there, 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'll make it, I'll make it an even 30 point type. Great, that's my type there for my navigation. Awesome. Now the next thing I'm going to do here, which I had, is I have this large picture. Okay, well, what is that? A large picture is just going to fit inside of this square. I'm going to show you something to get some pictures. So if you want to find some pictures online, what I tend to do is I go to unsplash.com, or you can go to pexels.com. There are so many websites for this. Or there's another one, pixabay.com. They all are free, royalty-free images, and they're just beautiful, beautiful images. Now I need a picture of a forest. So I'm just going to click on forest. I'm going to look in here, click on forest. And the same with Pixabay. And I'm just going to look and see who brings up the best picture for me. So, really nice pictures here in Pixabay. Really nice images here. Actually not down here. For in Unsplash and Pexels, same thing. Some really beautiful images, obviously. And these are all great quality. But the great thing about this, we're designing a website, so we don't need the best quality. We need 72 pixel per inch quality, and the pixel density does not need to be excellent. It could be really good. You know, they're going to be much bigger, so I scale them down. I never want to scale up. So you know what? This one is absolutely gorgeous. So I'm just going to click on it from Pixabay, and I'm just going to free download, and I'm going to say, you know what, 1920 1080, look at that. That's the size of my website. That's perfect. Now if I want to go bigger, I could, but not necessary for this particular situation. I'm just going to download. All right, now I can download it. It's going to go into my downloads. There it is right there. And I'm just going to open that up, and there's that forest. So I'm going to click on the forest, and I'm just going to bring it into Photoshop. I'm going to click and drag, bring it into Photoshop. There it is. Now it's going to open up as its own document. There it is right there. And let's look at the image size. Image size. It's 72 pixels per inch, 26 by 15. So this is massive for print if I needed to do that, which I would change the resolution anyways. But it's 1920 1080. That's what I want to look at, the pixel density. Great. So once again, click off of the lock. I'm just going to click and drag, bring it into my document, and paste it. Awesome. Now, I've got my pictures. Maybe you know many different ways to bring in pictures. That's how you do it. Find a picture online, take a picture yourself, it's on your computer somewhere, bring it into Photoshop either by going to File, Open, and find the image, or you can just click the image and drag it into onto the icon. What you do, I want to show you this as well. Another way to do it is actually to click, once I have Photoshop open already, I can actually just click and drag and bring it into Photoshop. But notice the difference. When I drag it right into my actual document, I'm going to press enter. Look, it makes it fit the size of my document no matter what. Even though it's bigger or smaller, it'll make it fit the size. Sorry, if it's bigger, it'll make it fit no matter what. If it's smaller, it'll just fit as is. But look at the difference. When I opened it in its own document and dragged it in, it brought it in as a picture, or what they call it here, a pixel layer. But once I dragged it in and brought it directly into my document from my computer, it made it a smart object. So that you might come across. But here's the thing I want you to do, especially in this assignment. I want all the images you bring into this particular document to be smart objects, because I want you to have that great quality control over them. So every image you bring into this document must be a smart object. Well, if I didn't drag it in this way, but I dragged it in this way, how do I convert this pixel layer into a smart object? I want to convert from this into this smart object. So that's all I have to do is click on my layer, right click, and click on convert to smart object. That's it, done. Nothing changes except now when you scale it up and down, it will remember the original data. So I undid it. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to select both. I'm going to scale them down. I'm going to scale them back up really big. Look at that. All right. This was the image. This is the non-smart object image. It looked very pixelated, very blurry, very gross. And this is the image that I had originally. It saved the smart object that I brought in, and it saved the original data. It looks great. Just very pristine, very nice. Okay, so I'm going to undo that. I'm going to bring it back to normal. I'm going to get rid of this smart object one. I don't need to. And I'm going to now make this one a smart object. Sorry, right click and convert to smart object. And now it's going to remember all that great pixel data it originally had. So I will not lose quality. Okay. Or if I scale it up too big or too small. Now, keep in mind, if I make it really, really, really big, there's still going to be issues of pixelation, obviously, because that's not the size it's supposed to be. I always need to scale things down in Photoshop, not scale them up. Now, the issue here, now having said that, that's great. The next thing I want to look at is clipping masks. And the issue is, what some people do is they'll just take this image and be like, okay, I want it to be this size. Great, I want it to be just that. Awesome. And you know what? I need it to be a little bit less, so I'm going to just bring it up like this. This is a huge no-no to make it fit. Do not ever do that, ever. Never squeeze. Never shrink like this, ever. Always scale proportionally, because the viewer can tell if something is done improperly by certain percentages. It's not good. So I'm going to undo that. However, I do want this image to fit in a certain area. Great. Let me bring it down here. What I'm going to do, I'm going to create a clipping mask, meaning I'm going to create a rectangle. So I'm going to create a shape layer that is going to allow me to put an image inside of it, and then I can control the frame. Now there is another option to show that too. I'm going to show both. So right now I'm just going to click on the rectangle tool, and I'm just going to click and drag. I want the picture to be from my side to side, my full width of my browser, the particular document right now. I'm going to make it black just by double clicking on it. Great. And I'm going to make sure that the roundedness is gone, and I'm just going to size it up one more time. I do a free transform. It snaps to the document. Perfect. I only need the picture to be this size. I don't want it to be any bit bigger, but look, this picture actually is bigger. It's taller than this image I have, than my rectangle. Well, let me place this image inside of this, and then I'll have better control over it. Okay. So here's the image. I need to place it above the layer that I want it to be the clipping mask. I want this layer to be the clipping mask, meaning this mask shows something and hides something. So what I need to do, I'm just going to bring this up a little bit here too so we can see. What I want to do, I'm going to hold down Option, and I'm just going to hover. I'm not going to click. I'm going to hover between the two layers, and look at my cursor. My cursor changes to a square with an arrow pointing down. I'm going to click on that. I click, and look, this arrow shows up here, and this indicates that this picture is now inside of this object. This object is now a clipping mask, and it is now showing part of this and hiding part of this. If I click on the layer, the picture layer, I can move it around inside, but I'm not losing any of the pixels. So once again, this is a great way to do it non-destructive. So I could always reuse these pixels over and over. The original ones are always there. That's great. And I can move it around. I could also shrink it down if I want to shrink it down. So you know what, I don't need it to be that big. I want it to be here. Maybe I'll put something there. Whatever the case is. And I can still change my mask. I say, you know what, I can make it a little bit bigger. So let me make it a little bit bigger. I could still always change that rectangle as a normal vector with vector characteristics. So it has, it still has your anchor points. I can move those around. I can do whatever. It's still treated like a vector, but obviously, yes, it is a raster. So I've created a clipping mask. To undo the clipping mask, very simply, hover again, hold down Option or Alt on a PC, and you can undo it. So now it is not inside that. It's not a clipping mask anymore. Another way to do it, to make sure these are both correct, once again, the picture needs to be above the layer that's going to become the clipping mask. I can click on the layer, right click, and I could say create clipping mask, and then it does the same thing. So I could either hover over, hold down Option, or right click, and does the same thing. So that's how we make clipping masks, and a really, really great way to use these. All your images should be inside clipping masks. You should never have an image outside, because we're going to make sure that everything is very consistent looking, the same sizes, and the best way to do that is using clipping masks. Now there is another way to do this. Instead of just using a clipping mask or a rectangle like that, but it acts the same way. They're called frames. Now I currently don't have frames up here because I don't use them too often. So I'm actually going to click on my toolbar here and click on my frame tool because I always got rid of it. So I'm going to click on my frame tool, and it shows up. There it is. And now it acts the exact same way. So I could actually have, I'm going to have this selected here. I'm going to click a frame. So let's just say it's the same thing as using a rectangle tool. There's my frame. So what I can do, I could actually click my picture. I'm going to duplicate it. Hold on, Option, click and drag. And I just bring it onto the document. See what happened there? I just dragged it onto that layer and it automatically went inside. So now let's play around with this a little bit. I could move this over my frame a little bit. See, the frame got highlighted. I can change up the size of the frame. Oh, I duplicated, didn't want to do that. I can change the size of the frame exactly the same way as the clipping mask works with the rectangle. So now I just have, instead of having two layers, I actually just have this layer, the one frame all together. I can move around the picture. Click on the frame. I can move the frame around and the picture together. That's kind of a nice option. Here, if I want to do that together, I have to select both layers together. If I don't, only the rectangle, the frame will move, or the picture will move. Here, it's all in one layer. So you might prefer to use frames. I do not mind whichever one you use, as long as you contain your pictures, your shape layers, your pixel layers inside some type of frame or clipping mask. That's very, very important. So I'm going to get rid of this frame, not necessary. Get rid of that. Great. There we go. So now if I continue on, I can actually play around with bringing this in. I'm not going to play around with the whole thing. I'm not going to make this whole thing. I'm going to just only make a few more things here. I definitely want to talk about type. So type is super important when we're talking about websites. So what I want to do now is I want to talk about hierarchy. I want to talk about how we should be playing with our type. So we have to treat this almost like a print ad, the same kind of way, a print design. So I'm going to click on my type, and I know that this is going to go from potentially here to here. Sure, why not? And Lorem Ipsum shows up automatically, but this is going to be my About Us section. But now I did call it About up here, so let me call it About down here. All right, now I can center that. Great, and it's centered inside of the text frame. I can make this wider if I want to say, hey, go to the full margin. That's fine too. Now, what did I do so far? Well, let's look at my content. I have these words up here. That's all I have is simple words, and they're myriad. Now, this is not a great way to start because I should use a non-default typeface, because just so we learn to play around with different type, I'm going to use one I really like to use for web. It's called Chireno. I'm probably saying it wrong. I'm just going to say that this up here is going to be bold. So I'll do a bold one up here. And there it is, so it stands out nice. I probably don't need to make it bold because there's a lot of negative space around there. Probably not necessary. Either way. Now I'm going to do the same down here. I'm going to double click to access the type. I can either double click on it, or I can just double click here on the T of that layer that I want to access, and it works the same way. And once again, I'm going to change this to that same typeface. And I'm going to make this bold too, let's just say. And you know what? I'm also going to make it, if I click on my character panel, I'm going to make it all caps. Maybe I'll click on here or up here to change the color of it. I'll make it, I'm going to, as I hover over into my space here, I'm actually able to use my eyedropper, and I can now select color. So I want to select this nice blue that I have on the logo, because again, we're branding the site with the brand that we already have the logo on. With my logo, I've already have color, I already have typeface that I'm choosing, I already have a lot going for me that I already know what I should do. So let's keep it all consistent. I'm not going to make everything red. Well, that's not what my logo is all about, and specifically this brand. So I'm going to click on that blue shows up. It's more or less that almost 100% CMYK. I'm just, or 100% cyan. I'm just going to press OK. Now that's my color. That's it. Okay, great. Now let's go one step further. So I could either just leave this alone, and that's my title, or I could put some more type in here. But I'm just going to leave this alone as its own typeface. As its own text frame. It's just going to hold that type. Now here, what I want to talk about is line length. So right now, let's pretend we are using Lorem Ipsum. I would really prefer it on this website, in this project, if you brought in your own type. If you actually made a website with proper content, proper pictures, all that great stuff, it would really make sense. Now, what I want to do is, I want to make sure this type, okay, this obviously does not work for body type, and that's okay. Remember, what did we say? We said the body type has to be a minimum of 18. It cannot be any smaller than that. Now here's another one that people sometimes make a mistake. Never, ever, ever should body type be uppercase. It should be sentence case, meaning sentence case means uppercase at the beginning word of the sentence and everything else lowercase, unless that's the name of something, then it could be uppercase there too. But everything should be sentence case, where it's lowercase inside of the sentence structure. Well, the other thing here, I got to get rid of this bold. It's going to make it very hard to read. Now there's type that is readable, and there's type that it's more readable or less readable. Right now, this type is centered. That makes it a little bit harder to read. That's why it's not always great to center your type, especially if you have a lot of type. It's okay to center type, especially if you have a little bit of type, but not if you have a lot of type. If it's body type, we need to left align or right align, but in our situation, left align is best. So we have somewhere to go to. We read something, we go back, we read something, we go back. We always have a reference line to go back to. I'm also going to change this to maybe more of a gray. Now, it doesn't have to be stark black. It could be a gray tone, a grayishness, so it, the contrast isn't overwhelming. Now, but here is an issue though. If I grab this content and I'm just going to copy it over and over and over again, this is actually also very unreadable. When you have type go from one side all the way to the other side, yeah, it kind of looks nice in terms because it kind of creates this square type situation. And I should also mention this too. If you're working with the grid layout, your columns, and it's kind of getting a little bit overwhelming, it's kind of distracting you in your design, you could actually remove the grid. Now I say toggle it off and on, not delete your grid, but just keep it on by just pressing Command or Control : okay, the same up here, view your guides, and you can actually show guides right there. It's Command : or semicolon. You could turn them on and off. So to turn them on and off, Command : it toggles them on and off. So right now I want them off. So what I want to show you is, like, reading this is very difficult, and this is what we call line length. So line length right now is very long, and this is very hard to read. What I want to do is break this up for the viewer to take it a little bit easier on them. Now, what do? I'm going to bring back my guides. I can bring it back in a little bit, sure. And what I also want to do, regular was not bad. It just still seems a little bit thicker, but that's okay. So now I'm actually going to create a 2-column structure. Look at that. Now what I'm doing, I'm letting that gutter do its job. It's separating the type. Once again, if I want to increase the gutter size, I can, but right now I'm happy with this gutter size. I'm keeping it within the margins. And now I'm actually creating a more readable amount of type here. I'm breaking it up into nice packets for the viewer to take in. So now instead of going all the way, let me duplicate this and show you the opposite. Wrong way. That's what I want. Okay, this goes all the way. Instead of reading it this way, read, go to the next line and keep going, there's a better chance they're going to skip a line or accidentally not know where they're going. There's a far better chance here with this 2-column structure, 1, 2, with this column structure, that they're going to be able to read and go back and find their space much, much easier. This is far more readable. Now we can even go one step further. Let me do it this way. I'm going to come bring this down here, and I'm actually going to bring back my column structure, my grids, and I'm going to make this even easier. I'm going to say, let's do a 1, 2, 3, 4 column structure there. Bring this over. And now I'm creating a 3-column structure. Now, how do we know if the line length is best? Now, the optimal line length is 40 to 60 characters. Now, right now, this is going to be way too many characters. So let's quickly count. I'm going to count this, 1, 2, 3. Now, when I say characters, I also mean spaces. I also mean punctuation. I mean all of that, not just the individual letters, but characters. So I'm up to about 60 here. This is roughly 60, which is nice, between 40 and 60. This, obviously, you can tell will roughly be probably 120, if not more, which is horrible. This is a little bit less. This is roughly 40, a little bit less. So either this one or this one are both more legible, far better than this one. So it's up to you if you want to do a 2-column structure, 3-column structure. 4 will probably be too much, but at least now it's better readable. It's far more readable, but it also depends on your typeface. It depends on the type size. All that stuff does matter, but what always remains consistent is how many characters across it is, and you could always adjust accordingly. So that is what I wanted to talk about, line length. So hopefully you now understand. Never do something like this where it's too long and the characters are far more than 40 or between 40 and 60. So I'm just going to get rid of that. But a 3-column structure could work as well too, but I'm going to get rid of those as well. All right, so I like this, what I've done here. So now what I need to keep in mind, I need to keep this consistent. This is the look of my title. This is what it looks like. This is the look of my body content. I'm not going to create another body content down here, maybe explaining my gallery, and I'm going to change the typeface to something else. I'm going to change up the, the type size. Oh, this is a new, this is my body content too. No, no, no. Keep it consistent. This is hierarchy where we're talking about what they expect, what they see here, they expect later and later and later. The viewer should be able to see this is the type, this is the way it looks. We don't keep changing it up, we keep it consistent. Now, the other thing to mention is sectioning. I want to talk a little bit about sectioning. And right now, I have a lot going on here. Very unorganized layer structure. Not good. So let's organize our layer structure. And this is very, very important. So number one, I have this gray bar up here. Okay, and I have my social media along with it. That's one section. This area is one section. Let's keep it nice and clean. So I'm going to select both of those here in my layer panel. Command G, Control G on a PC, and let's just say this is my header at the very, very top. Great. Now, I have my logo. Let me bring it down a little bit. Now that I played around with this type, you could always go back and play around with more type, and this looks a little odd now that my grid is gone. So let me actually, you know what? Let me align this. Maybe I should align this over here. That makes more sense. Shut my grid off. Ah, that does look a little bit better. Okay, we could always play around with it. Remember, my structure over here was a little bit different too, but I had something to help me align it. But once again, we could always play however you want to play with it. So now I have my logo and I have this, my type here. I selected both, Command G. And you know what? This could be logo and nav. It doesn't matter. I could realistically make this whole thing header, but I'm just going to really separate myself. So now I have another section. Great. Now how about this? Okay, I have my type here, or sorry, I have a picture here in my clipping mask. So I'm going to put that in its own section, Command G. Okay, and I'm going to call this pic. That's a picture. And what I'm going to do, I want to structure my layer panel the way that my actual artboard is set up too. So what's at the top? The header. So let's bring that header all the way to the top. Just click and drag it. That blue line shows you where it's about to go. There it is. What's next? My logo and my navigation. So let's bring that logo and nav up just underneath header. Great. And then my picture. Well, you know what? Realistically, I could say it's all a part of my header. So let's do that. I'm going to take my grouped picture layer and my grouped logo and nav layer, click and drag, and bring them into my header. See how that works? I'm not putting it above. I'm not putting it below. I'm putting it into the whole layer highlights blue. And now if I twirl that down, there's my logo and nav. There's my pic, and there's my social media. So you know what? I'm going to bring those up higher inside that grouped layer. And you know what? I'm just going to group these and call these, maybe I'll call these social media. So that's my social media and the bar that goes with it. Great. So now within my header, I shut it all off. I actually have controlled my artboard really well. I controlled my layer panel really well. I've organized it, social media, logo, nav, pic. It's all inside of one header. So this whole area is my header, let's say. Great. Now the same thing happens here. About, I'm going to bring above all my lorem ipsums, my type. But once again, I'd really love it if you put your own type in there. And I'm going to group it. Now this is the about area. So that's it. Now my next, if I continue to go, here I did a nice 3-column structure, really nice typeface used there. And I created another little interest here. I created maybe something more about the service or product I provide, which happens to be, we protect forests and industry and, rivers and all this great stuff. So that's what this particular product is, service. I just put a nice little picture there. So you know what? I'm just going to copy and paste this, keep it simple for myself. Copy. I'm going to bring it into my new document here, paste it. Great. Look at that. So that's another way to play around. You could actually copy and paste layers from one document to another. Just Command C, Command V. I've showed you that earlier, but now we could do it this way as well. Command G. So this is my kind of like my filler. Let's just call it my picture filler. I could call it whatever I want. And I'm going to put it underneath about, and there we go. So now there's my picture. But here's an issue that some people have. Sometimes what we like to do is we like to tighten up everything. This is no good. We have to utilize that nice white space that we've already kind of used on the sides. Well, let's use it in our sectioning as well. Move the About Us section down. Move the filler down. Now, this is why I mentioned before, when you're adding rows with your guides, you could add rows, but things do change. But ideally, you want some nice space around everything. Now, I'm not saying you have to make it, massive, which this isn't horrible. But is it necessary to have that much space? Well, that's up to you. And thinking about balance and structure and how you want that. So I could bring it up a little bit. I'll bring this up a little bit. Now, what I like to do sometimes, which some people may say is not the greatest way, I actually like to use my arrow keys to give me consistent balance. So I'll just go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Maybe I'll do that same with the about. Bring them all together. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Now, that is a mathematical metric way to do it, which is okay. But really, you should do it optically. You should say, you know what, because of the space here, it actually adds more space. I should probably bring the filler down a little bit more to balance it optically. So that makes more sense, you know? So that's a way, but do not suffocate the content with below sections or above sections. Let it breathe. Let there be some nice space there. That's a very big issue when we're looking at that. The next one I'm gonna look at is creating our gallery. Now, this is really simple. You kind of already know how to do this, but I am going to show you. So I'm just going to take this about, like I already have that. So I'm just going to duplicate it and bring it down here. I'm going to hold down Option, hold down Shift. I'm going to turn my guides back on. And once again, I'm going to do that, the 10 by holding down Shift and the arrow. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Now it's roughly about the same distance away from the top here. But this one is going to be my portfolio or gallery or whatever you want to call it. And then I'm going to add in my structure of my, my gallery here. So I have all these images. But first, let's set it up with clipping masks. Okay, let's look at that. So I'm just going to click and drag. And what I did here, actually, I created a 1, 2, 3, 4 column structure. So let me do the same here. Okay, I'm going to select my rectangle and I'm just going to click and drag. And there I go. It's a perfect square. I'm going to make sure my roundedness is gone. Click on 0 to make that. Now it's white. Okay, but let me just double click to make it black so I can see it. Okay, and I'm just going to duplicate it over. So I went from here to here. That's great. So I'm going to duplicate it, skip a gutter right there. And I'm going to do the same, skip a gutter, the same, and skip a gutter, the same. Great. So now I have this column structure. Now I can select these as well, and I can duplicate them down. So now, and it's snapped, so it made sure the same space was here that was here. All right, I can bring them all up. And once again, maybe I'll bring it the same distance away that the type is from about, and I'll eye that a little bit. Maybe roughly about there. I could always change that, and there I go. So now what I'd want to do is bring in content, bring in pictures, and make clipping masks out of it. So I'm actually just going to do it this way. I'm just going to pretend I brought a new picture. This is the picture here. This is rectangle 3. Once again, I could bring this to the top. I know this is here, so I could bring this one to the top, but I'm fine with that right now. I'm just going to bring this in. There's my image, and I'm going to make a clipping mask. The image is above the square I want it to go into. Hold on Option, click, and now it's inside. What I can do with that, I'm going to click it again, and I'm just going to shrink it down. So this gallery idea realistically would be functional in a way that the developer would put some code behind it and say, you know what, click on it, and what would happen, maybe a light box shows up and the picture shows up on your one-page website. It doesn't link inside or go somewhere else. It just clicks and a new image would show up, and then you click on another and it would go through. So it would still be a one-page website where this would link to. So that's how you would make your gallery. So that's how I made this gallery here. Just grabbed a bunch of pictures, and I want you to fill up your gallery. I want you at least to have, 8 images here, 10 images. I want you to have a decent amount of images in your gallery, not just, 2 squares and you put some pictures in there. Have at least potentially 8 to 10 in your gallery. However you choose to make the column structure work for yourself, it should be there. Now here's the next thing I was talking about. This is going to be another assignment that we work with, that we're going to have a banner. So normally what we see on websites, we see ads or banners for other companies, other products or services that may align with the product or service you're already on, or it might be drastically different. Here I'm protecting forests, and here I want to go eat at Napoli restaurant in Niagara Falls. Either way, people pay to have banners on other websites, that do really well, high traffic, because now all of a sudden they'll click here and they'll go to that website. So it's a good way to advertise. Obviously, all the social media does it quite well. So what we can do is we can bring in our banner into our website. So let's actually do that. So here I've opened up my banner. So I've made the banner, I created a background, I added a picture, I added a logo, I added a little bit of a tagline, and I added in a button. It's always good to add that button, to click here, some type of call to action to do something. People probably know that they can click on it, but the call to action always helps out. Like book now, make reservations, click here. Click here is very, fairly vague. So if you actually want to say, a little bit more, eat now or whatever, order now, that's always a good idea. So what I'm going to do, I have all this set up. I have my layers structured nice and easy. I'm just going to select it all. Command A or select all. And I'm just going to copy it, but I'm going to copy merged. I'm going to copy merged because what it's going to do is going to copy everything it visually sees. So copy merged. I'm going to go back into my document and I'm just going to click my grid back on. And what I should do also is, this is a part of the about, no. So see how I shut that off and it's all there? Not a good idea. So what I should do is make a new group folder, call it portfolio, and move it out of the about us. So there's the about, there's my pick, there's my header. So look, header, portfolio, no. So it'd be header, about, then filler, then portfolio. All right, so once again, let me do that one more time. My apologies. So here I have it at Command A. I've selected it. So I do a select all. I do an edit copy merged, and I'm going to go back into my new document and I'm going to paste it. Command V. There it is. Great. Now a little bit bigger than what I needed, which is okay. This was in a different dimension I had. So let me shrink it down to fit inside my column structure. Remember, bigger is better, and then I could shrink it down. I don't want something smaller and blowing it up, because that's going to make the very pixelated not look nice. So I'm just going to shrink it down to fit inside. There it is. There's my banner now. It's good. It's great. It's where I want it to be. Once again, I should be keep an eye on how far I want to keep it away from something. If it's drastically different, maybe it needs to be really far away. However I want, and you could put your banner anyway. Your banner can go up at the very top. Your banner can go at the bottom, where it's all said and done, wherever you want to put your advertising materials on your website. The last part of this really is more or less the contact information. Now, normally when we see contact information on websites, what do we see? We see maybe a directional map that people can click on, a Google map. We see, where it is, the logo again, and how to get a hold of this particular product or service. So I'm going to do the same thing there, but I'm just going to copy this content. If it is not vector, that would be very nice. No, it's all vector, so I don't want that. What I do want is this to be type in Photoshop as well. So what I can do is go to Illustrator, and because I already had some icons made up, what I can do here is I can actually just grab my icons, my vector. I can grab them all separately, but I grab them all together. I'm going to copy my icons and I'm going to bring them in here. I'm just going to paste. Remember, smart object. Okay, there they are. I can make them a little bit bigger just so I can see them a little bit better. Press enter, bring them in. Great. Okay. Now I'm probably going to make another section. Maybe I'm going to give it like a bit of a background, just because I want to have better sectioning here. Okay, I have this and this. That's great. This is good. It's in a white space. This is that filler space I could have. Then I have this again. Now, you know what? I'm going to grab this gray bar up here. I really like it. I'm going to paste it down here underneath my picture. So where's that picture? It's right there. And my content right there. So let's actually group this. Now you can group just one layer into a group layer. Doesn't have to be multiple layers. It could just be one. I group it, Command G, and I'm just going to call this banner. So the banner is inside that group. Great. And now I have this contact. So I'm going to Command G that contact, group it. And now my contact's in there. Well, what I also want to do, I want to add that gray bar I just had. I'm just going to drag it down. Option, drag down. There it is. Now I could drag it down here. Perfect. I'm going to make it bigger. Okay, and I'm going to set it behind or underneath this type, so this type shows up. Remember, whatever's underneath is further away from the viewer. Whatever's on top is closer to the viewer. That's what I wanted there. So now what I can do, I can actually bring in, I'm also going to bring in this image as well. I'm going to copy that, the map image. I'm going to bring it in, but I could also find it online if I actually wanted to go to Google Maps and do a screenshot and find that map. But obviously this would be more of a development functional thing where they could actually just get the map. Now, once again, I brought it in. I should make it a smart object. Convert to smart object. Just so I should make everything a smart object, all my pixel layers. And I'm going to put it inside and make it a clipping mask. hold on Option, click, there it's a clipping masks now. All right. And now with my content, well, what I should do is copy this, copy, and paste it in. There it is. Now it's behind. Where should I put it? Let's go find it. There it is up there. Let's organize this again because I get a little confused sometimes, right? So my banner, my contact, my portfolio. Okay, portfolio needs to be above contact. Great. And there it is. So now I could actually have it like that if I want. Double click, call it contact. I could even bring this in if I want to. Turn my guide back on, make sure I'm aligned nicely. Let's zoom in a little bit. Once again, it's not a bad idea to zoom in, zoom out, get a sense of everything, but also know that at 100% roughly your actual size, you're going to get exactly what you're going to see there. But once again, focus on that 100%. So here what I can do is I can type in my content. So I'm just going to click and drag. And I'm going to make this very simple. I'm going to left align. And I'm going to keep it Trueno, but I'm going to obviously, I can keep it bold. I'm going to have to change up that color because that contrast is not good. Contrast is very, very important. Even this blue on this gray doesn't really look that great. So I might even play around with that to make it white. So I'm going to make it white and I'm going to make it not all uppercase and I'm going to change it. The bold is fine. So let's just pretend. All right, now I have some content information there, but even still 30 point a little bit big. So let me bring it down. I change up my leading to make it a little bit better. Let me get rid of my guides so I can see a little bit better. Change up my leading here to make this a little bit tighter because it belongs more to this. All right, we could really play around. There's so many different ways to do a contact layout. You could have it go across instead of up like this. It doesn't really matter. Once again, I kind of wasn't crazy about that color. Maybe I can make it white. Now you say, well, maybe the hierarchy is a little bit different now because these are blue and they're centered. This is kind of centered in this area and it's white, but it still has a consistency to it, which is nice. The other thing I could do is I could undo that and I can maybe bring it up here, say this is my contact, center it, and I could bring all my contact down all together. Once again, I could do that. Option 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That could be, I could do it that way too. Now, the other thing I do want to talk about is aligning. So using the align tools. Now, the align tools here are different than Illustrator and InDesign. I'm actually not as much a fan of the Photoshop ones, but I understand why they do it. So if I want to say align this word about, so this is in its own text frame, I could align it either to a selection or the canvas. That's it. I can't do any key alignments to a certain object. So I can actually just click on these three dots and go to selection or canvas. And because nothing else is selected, it'll go to canvas and I can say, yep, there, and I want to center it and it's centered. But even if I center it to the right, it'll go to the right. Center it to the left, it'll center it to the left. But that's what I want. Now the other option is if I do click on another object, if I have more than one object selected, I can choose selection. And now they're not grayed out anymore. I could actually select and I can say, yeah, select this. I can align it this way, this way, this way. A lot of different ways to play around with that to align. All right. I'm just undoing that. Now, if I have multiple things selected, let's make sure. I'm going to bring this out. 1, 2, 3, 4. I can now do a distribution. So I can click on this and look at all my distribution options. And I could say, I want them all to be distributed properly this way or whatever way, however you want that to work out. A lot of options there for aligning as well, which clearly at the moment I do not want. And that's kind of it with our layout. What am I looking for? I'm looking for a header, social media, a navigation that matches the body, about, portfolio, contact. If you want to add more pertaining to the service or product you provide, add more. But if you add more navigation, that should also show up in your body somewhere, okay? Have a logo. I could do something interesting with my picture here. Once again, I could add the logo onto it. So I'm going to say copy. I'll copy that. I'll click on my picture, paste it, and it'll show up right there. Enter. And I can make it bigger. Remember, it's a smart object, so it's going to retain that good quality. I can say, it doesn't look great, so I'm going to double click on this area here. I'm going to change the color overlay. I'll make it white. Maybe I will add a little bit of a drop shadow there. Pretty cool. Maybe bring it down a little bit. Okay, there we go. Now that creates some interest. The other thing I could do is maybe let's do something even further interesting. I'm going to create a rectangle over top of this whole thing. Look at There's my rectangle. And I'm also going to make it a clipping mask inside because it's kind of odd where it's showing. I'm going to make it also, you could place many things inside of a clipping mask. And I'm just going to change the color of it. Let's make it a very specific dark green here. Okay, so what I want to do now, this is just to create interest. If you're interested in doing this, I want to make it a blending mode. So let's play around with our blending modes and just click on normal and kind of just cycle through them and see if we kind of create something interesting here instead of just showing the actual picture. And once again, even though if you're happy with it or not happy with it, you could always change the opacity as well. So there's a dark one that I really liked up here. That was really, even that one's very nice. And I could always change the opacity of that layer and say, you know what, I want to bring it down. Don't need as much of it, or I could have more of it. So right about there is kind of nice, kind of create some interest there, which is pretty cool. Another thing I can do is add adjustment layers to some of these pictures. So right now, this picture, if you noticed in my other one here, it kind of looks different. I kind of subdued the colors. I didn't make them as saturated. But if I look at this one, they're quite saturated. So what I do, I can make an adjustment layer. So I'm going to click on adjustment layer, and I'm going to bring down the saturation. And what I have to do though, because if you know anything about adjustment layers, what happens when you put an adjustment layer on, it affects everything below it. So it's going to adjust this, it's going to adjust this, it's going to change everything. Let me show you what I mean. So this adjustment layer, I just want to focus on here. So I'm just going to have that adjustment layer on, the hue saturation, and in my properties it shows up. So let me bring down the saturation. So as I bring down the saturation of this, well, look what happens. It also changes the saturation of this and this and this and this. I don't want that. I only want it to affect this image. Well, what do I do? To make it a clipping mask. So it will only affect this image and what's inside the clipping mask. So I hold on Option, hover between the two layers, click, and now it only affects this. It does not affect these things anymore. So that's another way to play around with clipping masks. So adjustment layers can only affect certain layers. And that's it. So I can still play around with it, say, you know, I want it black and white, or I want it super saturated, whatever. So I'm just bringing it down and kind of having some fun there. Okay. And now I'm looking at my layers again, and I'm kind of noticing, okay, are we still organized again? I've been adding things, going back and forth, playing around with things. So I still have my header, about. So once again, I'm organizing it from top to bottom. Header is at the top, about, then about a section, then my filler, then my banner, yes, and then I have my banner is below the portfolio, so click and drag it down there. There I go, banner. Then I have my contact, and then I have my background. Great. Now what I can do also to even further organize my layers is to color them. I click on my layer, I could right click, and I can make it red. And in my next one, I'm gonna make it orange. And my next one, I'm gonna make it yellow. Now there's only so many colors we have here, but it will help us if we really have a ton. Now here we don't have a lot of layers realistically, but it will help me if I needed to add more layers or whatever the case is, and if I had more I could just make color changes. But here if I drop it down, all of them are red, and here if I drop it down, all of them are orange. So it's a very helpful way to help you organize your layers, especially when you have just like a ton of layers to work with. So here we're kind of done with the majority of what we were looking at in terms of making this. So what I can do, I can even, like you say, if I want to duplicate a layer, I have this filler layer, I'll duplicate it, hold on Option and drag it underneath contact, and there it is. And what I could do is just, you know, bring it down. I'm holding down, and what you have noticed, maybe I use the space bar a lot to move around with my hand tool. Instead of clicking on the hand tool, which I never use, I use my space bar on my keyboard to control and move things around, and I can bring this down. I'm just holding down Shift to keep it in line. And there's another one, so I can fill this up with a different picture. I can do whatever I want. All right, so I can, if say this one I want to make the picture bigger, that's great. Cool, play around with that. Once again, it should be a smart object, so you can't make it a smart object after the fact. You've already been expanding it and changing it. You should make it a smart object as soon as you actually bring it in to Photoshop. So I'm just kind of aligning things, moving things around here a little bit more, and just playing around. And that's all you're gonna do. You can go back and forth, maybe you work on one section, leave it alone, play on another, and then go back to it, create some more interest. But notice my sectioning. Nice spaces here, nice and simple. My social media can go on in here if I want, on my contact, because maybe it's more of a part of my contact information, or maybe I really want people to know I'm on social media, they should go visit there. I have a nice interest here, which will really engage viewers to come and see what I'm all about. Your top part should really be that, who you are, maybe even a phone number right away you should put there. your navigation and what you do. If they read nothing else, at least they can get a sense of what is going on. I should have a look, an overall look of what I'm doing. If I even want to increase the size of my titles, I can, and make them stand out more in a very specific way. Let's pretend I kind of did it this way, and I'll make them a little bit bigger, let's say. Let's make them all 40. So if that's the case, I should really keep everything the exact same. So this one should also be 40, and it should be left justified, or left aligned, I should say, not justified. I'll open that up so I can see it. So remember, if you have something like this, and this is very similar to InDesign, where if something is in there, but it shows a little plus sign here, there's a little plus sign that's shown right there. That means there's content inside of the frame, but it's just not seen. So make sure that you expand your frame, so therefore it can be seen properly. So now I have 40, 40. Now I have to do it to this title as well. So always keep them consistent. And there's my contact and filler. And now we notice that obviously I have too much space here. Remember, I made it bigger because of my image I brought in. I was going to use the structure. Don't need it. Not a problem. Click on my crop tool and bring it up. I bring it up to where I need it to be. It snaps to the bottom layer because I have it snapped to layers, remember? And now that's my website. Now it looks good. Now I could add different images in the back, change things up, whatever I want to do, add some interesting background colors if I want to add some background colors. But once again, keep it simple, keep it nice, focus on the content that needs to be readable, legible. Your color choices are also very important. You don't want to overkill the color. Right now, my brand, the specific colors of my brand are this green and blue. Now I brought in this neutral gray that I always like to bring in just to add something simple to utilize over and over instead of just using lots of colors. So really I have a black, or this gray, a white, and my green and blue. So I added some green there, I have the blue there, I have the blue here, added that gray again, kind of to bring that back in, I have the blue. So these are the things. If I want to add some green in, well, the green happens to be here, which is nice, I can do that. If I want to keep this method, this look for all my pictures, I could do that as well. So it's entirely up to you, like how far you want to go with the branding, but you definitely need to have some consistencies there because they're very, very important. Where'd that green go? There we go. And one more. It's important to keep your branding branded. It's important to keep it consistent. It's very important to do that. All right, there we go. Now these are obviously dark. I would play around with those more to bring out the contrast, so the lighter lights and dark darks. Once again, you don't have to actually have things stay totally within the margin. So if I want to say, okay, I want this to be inside the margin, and then this black space will be whatever, or it just won't be there at all. Click on that, Command T, bring it in. There we go. I could have it right in there. It doesn't matter how you do it because you could have content that's outside of the margin. But remember, if it's outside of the margin, there's a chance it could get cut off, but not necessarily. But you want to really keep things inside the margins so it won't get cut off if someone's looking at it through a different resolution, through a different type of screen, whatever the case is. So now that I'm done that, I want to show you one last thing with the grid setup. So right here, I've already set this up for you where we could look at column structure. So when I've had my columns set up already, let me bring back there we go. This is what I was talking about with the grid setup. So because I used a 12 column structure, well, why do we even use a 12 column structure? A 12 column structure is very useful, especially when we have using something like this because it's a multiple of 4. You have many, multiple of 4. You have many multiples and we can use that. So I have a multiple of 1. So I can use a 12 column structure. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I could use a 3 column structure, which uses multiples of 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then the same, I can use multiples of have 3 here, which uses 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Same here. Now you could have a 6 column structure and also a 12 column structure. So there's many versatile ways to utilize the grid to help you lay things out in a very organized manner. The more organized you are, the quicker the viewer can also pick up the information that you're putting out, and the quicker it is for you to design it and lay it out. Just randomly putting things in certain places and hoping they work will take you a lot longer, and optically to organize those will just be a nightmare, especially when you need to knock out work very, very quickly. So hopefully this helps lay out certain structures that you want. You could use any one of these column structures in your 12 column grid, but you're definitely going to find far more use out of it, as I did here. I created a 4 column, 1 column, 2 column, a lot of different ways to play around with it. Okay. The last thing I want to show you how to save this. So it can be saved obviously in Photoshop. I already have it saved. I named it properly, File Save. Great. Make sure you save often, save in multiple locations. The last thing I want to do is I want to export this. I want to export it as a flattened version of the website. Say I'm going to send it to a developer or send it to a friend and say, listen, take a look at this. What do you think? So we can do that. A quick way to do that: File, Export, Save for Web, or Option Shift Command S. It's all your keys plus S, and you can do that, Save for Web. Now, what do we see when we look at this? We see this 2 up. Now we can change it to original, optimized. 2 up for me, I always use. 4 up is a little too many. 2 up. So what we can do here is we can actually say how much control we want our file size to be. We have control over the file size, the dimensions, all that. If I want to change up the image size, I can do that right here, but I'm happy with it. And it's 1920 by. So at the end, it ended up being 4200 roughly. I can change up the files, the type of file: JPEG, PNG8, PNG24, web bitmap, or GIF. JPEG is totally fine, or I mentioned PNG is fine as well. The quality stays the same, 100% maximum. Great stuff. So this is good. But what I could see is this is the original. It says right there, original is 31 megabytes. That's the PSD. But now this new version that I'm going to convert it to a JPEG, this side, it says JPEG. It's actually 4.6 megabytes. That's really small, much smaller than this. However, because I have so much going on, if I took out a couple layers, whatever, it would make it smaller. So the less you have, the smaller the file size. But this is generally pretty good. If I did want to send this to somebody, say, I didn't need to be perfect size, so maybe I make it just 1,000. Well, if I did that, it's going to bring down the file size significantly, but it's not the exact size, but that's okay. For me, I do want you to keep it at the right size, so don't even touch this. A JPEG or a PNG, entirely up to you. Make sure the quality is 100 and you're good to go. So we can now click and we'll say save. And what we're going to do, obviously put it in our organized folder, which happens to be website, but you're going to name it properly. New folder. I'm going to call this one final, because this is where you're going to put your final. And you could just call it that. Last name, first initial section number, and website. And this is the JPEG. Great. Save it. Perfect. Now, another quick way to save this, if you really wanted to, here's another way. It's actually, you'd have to group everything here together. So let's just do that really quick, just to show you this option. You don't have to do it this way, but it's an option I want you to learn about. I'm going to select everything and I'm going to group it. So I'm just going to quickly group from layers, and I'm just going to call it my website. So everything's inside of this main website. There it is. And I still have everything, which is great. Now what I can do, and this also works really well with artboards, which we'll talk about another time, that I can right click and do a quick export as PNG. And when I click on that and do that, that's all it is. It now just tells you where to save it. Well, I want to save it in that same final folder, which is right there. I'll call this one website. I'll call it properly again, but it's going to save it as a PNG. A last name, first initial section number, underscore website, save. And that is it. There it is. The PNG, and it's the full option. Now the full screen. Now if I were just to not group this and do it separately, it would save each of these as their own PNG, which might come in handy for you as well. So now that you have everything here, we have seen how we also utilize our pictures versus type. So do we have a lot of pictures? No, not overwhelming. Do we have a lot of type? No, not overwhelming. Could we add more type? Sure, to create more interest, more things we need to read, an article we want to talk about, whatever the case is. So it's also important to talk about how many pictures you have versus type. So if it's just a lot of type, well, maybe it's that kind of website. Like it's a blog site where you're telling a story, explaining something interesting and adding pictures, or it's something more of a photography website. Say we're showing a lot of photos and very little type. So we do have to be careful of how much type we have versus pictures and create an interesting balance there, which is very important. So hopefully now this has helped you understand hierarchy and how we can really make our websites clean and simple using the same typeface throughout, one typeface, a few different fonts obviously of that typeface, colors, keeping our colors intact, don't go overboard with too many colors, keep it branded, very simple, blue, blue, blue all the way across. Same typeface, same logo. Don't stretch your images. Make sure all your images are smart objects. Use social media, the 3 main I gave you. If you want to add more social media, you totally can. It's entirely up to you. Make sure your navigation matches your body and your body matches your navigation. Once again, if you add another, something down here about your clients, maybe you want to show off your clients, well, make sure clients is up here too if you want to add that. Entirely up to you. Keep it simple. Create that sectioning, spacing so it makes sense on how it all works together. Make sure your banner's in there as well, and then you're good to go. Now, one thing I also want to mention here, a couple issues. I do want to show you that, we can play around with this quite a bit more. So still using my columns and my guides there, what I can do is I can actually show, another kind of layout. So I have my logo up here, I have some type still there, my navigation. So a little bit of a different layout, different setup. Once again, I can move this back around if I want to kind of move this over here, but still line it up with my column structure and maybe have this over here and maybe bring my, logo over here. However, I could play around with this. There's so many different ways to play around with this, and obviously I would maybe fine tune this in terms of making sure it all lays out nicely and is aligned properly. So alignment and spacing is also very important. So just playing around. So instead of putting the logo there, I put a nice little catchphrase here, some kind of tagline. Obviously, want that kind of call to action, like something to get the viewer interested or whatever in my product or service. And then I changed it up here too, where now I have my labels or my headings over here. Now they're on the left hand side, a slightly different style, but once again they remain consistent throughout no matter what. And here I still have my filler, played around with a slightly different portfolio. Now 100% it does not necessarily align. It aligns pretty well to my content, but it's not exactly the way it was before where, here's a box and then here's a box and here's a box. So I played around with it a little bit, but it's still pretty grid-like and modular and works quite well. But you can kind of move things around a little bit, but generally try to stick to the column, especially in this situation. And then I played around with the contact information. Instead of having it just stacked up vertically, I played around with it a little bit more horizontally. I brought my social media down here. I expanded my map to look like that. We've seen that. I also moved my banner down here. Just once again, you can move your banner anywhere, but it should make sense, obviously. A lot of nice white space, that's it. So I just wanted to show you some different options you can have. There's so many ways to display this, even if within the grid, it seems like, oh, it's rigid, I can't do much with it. No, you can do so much with the grid, and it just makes it so much easier for you to move things around. One last thing I do want to mention that some people have issues with, that they always want to do this, and this is one thing we want to stay away from. In some situations, we have, maybe you want to put a little background here, and that's totally fine. So I'm just going to create a rectangle, and I'm going to put a little background here. Let's just pretend I want to do this. What some people tend to do, I'm going to get rid of that rounded rectangle. I'm going to put it underneath my type so I can see my type. And I'm just going to give it a bit of a, let's just say I'm going to give it a bit of that, this color here for whatever reason. Okay, cool. So mainly what I want to do is I want my type to show through. Okay, so I want my type to be on some type of background, which could totally work in whatever way and whatever reason you might want to do that. The one thing some people tend to do for some very odd reason is butt up the type right against the border or the edge of this box. And it's just there's so much tension and it's hard to read and it's so distracting. It just does not work. So realistically, if you were to do this in any type of design, web, print, you just don't do this. So what you do instead, even though my box is lined up with the column structure and it's nicely laid out using my columns, I would just bring in my text frame so it does not touch the actual edge of the border, the box, whatever I have. So I leave some nice breathable space and I leave a nice margin here. So it just looks better, it flows better, it's readable, it's just better in general. And that's kind of what we want to get at. We don't want to butt up type right against a border of something. We want it to kind of be free within there, but still looks good and still flows and still, looks really, really nice. So just a heads up, don't butt your type up right against the edge of things, right against the border. Give it some nice breathable space. Even this, I can give even more breathable space if I need to. And once again, there's that extra plus sign, so there's more type I could bring down, and I would fix that. I would push this down and move everything down. So just something to think about. Once again, I hope these tips and tricks help you out create something really amazing, but a nice clean layout is what we're looking for. But you could definitely add some amazing graphics, some cool illustrations, some pictures obviously, and really have some fun with this.